Hey guys, Ted here for the Real Racers League. This is my Corvette C6R lap around Road America. It's a 159.175, which is the unofficial world record right now for the new tire model. Here are my split times, and we'll start off with a lap around in the cockpit view. Alright, and so there we have it. Had a little mistake down there in turn 8, but not too bad. It's a little bit faster than I was able to do in our official practice yesterday. The track temp here in this practice session dropped down a little bit. I did a 59.9 yesterday in the official practice. I guess we'll start off here and I can walk around each corner, my braking points, and what I'm looking for on the track. So coming up here to turn 1, I'm looking at the 4 cones here, the 4 marker, and I'm going to brake just a little bit after that, about the 375, once I get the tires up to temp. So basically enough time I pass the cones, and then I'm going to get on the brakes. And it's a pretty hard brake zone, but again, I'm only going up to about 50%, and I'm only going to come down to 4th gear here for the corner. Braking nice and straight. Start to turn in once I reach the this curbing over here on the left-hand side of the track, but I'm not really looking for that. I'm more looking for the apex curbing on the inside of the corner here. And I'm going to carry just that little bit of trail brake as I turn into the corner, help keep the rear of the car stable. Going to turn in and try and get the right side tires onto the apex curb. There's a bit of a dip and bump in the track here. And I want to be able to use as much of the exit as possible. So once I've hit that apex there and kind of hit that bump, I can get back on full throttle. Back this up just a little bit here. So basically I get all the way down, carrying that trail brake all the way onto the apex curb, hit the bump, full throttle, and the traction control will really help on the way out here. I'm going to keep a bit of steering angle into it as I accelerate out, because I don't want to hit the grass here, otherwise it's a very bad time. And use all that track on exit and try and avoid hitting any of the grass, dirt right here to avoid a 1X on exit. And that's how we take turn 1. We'll go back and we can watch that again in real time. Coming up here to turn 3, it's a little bit harder to find a brake marker for this corner because they're way over here on the outside wall. But I'm looking for around the 2, and I'll be braking about at the 2, if not a little bit after it at the 175. I usually try and just do it based off feel, and there's a little bit darker patch of pavement is more what I look for as my brake mark as opposed to looking over at the wall. Because if I'm looking over at the wall, I'm going to have a tendency to drive over onto the grass because the car goes where your eyes are. And see, so there's a little white line down there. So I'm actually hitting it right at about the 2 board. And I've gone up to 5th gear, and I'm going to come down to 3rd gear for turn 3. And I'm going to start to turn in pretty early, again, trying to get the right side tires onto the apex curbing as much as possible. I'm looking for a bit of a late apex. I don't want to turn in too early, but if you drive down too late until the road flattens out, then you're not going to be able to have enough grip to make the corner. So you have to kind of start tipping it in before the track fully flattens. I'm going to get the right side tires onto the apex curb, and again, once I reach that apex, I'm going to get back on throttle. Once the car's rotated, let the traction control do its work on the way out. And this particular lap, I didn't get too far over to the edge here, but again, you want to try and avoid the little gap right here, and there's a big divot in the curbing right there, and you can pick up a 1x and invalidate your lap if you get a little bit too far over. This is about right at the limit there. You don't want to hit that little patch of dirt right there. Let's come back and play this through one more time in the real speed. All right, coming down to turn 5. My brake marker for turn 5, it's about the 275. It's a little bit after the 3. You can brake at the 3, but I wouldn't push it too much farther to like the 250 or so. In this car, you don't gain a whole lot of time by pushing the brake zones. It's getting it slowed down real nicely is what we're looking for, especially coming into turn 5. So turn 5 is a really interesting braking zone in that it's not only downhill, but it also curves to the left, and there's a bit of a dog leg before it straightens up at about the 1 board down there. So I'm going to drive in, and I like to do all my braking in a straight line, and I'll kind of, as I'm coming down the straightaway, I'll kind of drift over to the right and then turn the car back straight. But you don't want to turn it too straight into the corner, otherwise, because we're still in a curve here on the track, we'll end up really tight over here on the grass. So I usually try and point it a little bit farther out and try and stay almost parallel to the wall here, and I'll end up out here, and that's why I like to brake earlier, because I need to get the car turned a little bit so I can make it the 90-degree corner, as opposed to if I drive in too deep, then I'm making more than a 90-degree corner. It's like a 100-degree corner where I'm almost coming back on myself. So that's why I like to not challenge this brake zone too much, if that makes sense. It may in a couple seconds to get up a little closer. So driving past the 3 board just a little bit, and this is real heavy on the brakes. Going to come all the way down to 2nd gear, and you see I'm keeping the wheel nice and straight. I'm going to be coming over here onto the entry curb on the right side. But again, this is just the track moving. It's not me tracking over to the right. I'm keeping the car nice and straight. Now once I get down here, 3rd gear, still heavy on the brakes, but I start to release off the brake pressure, and now I've come down to 2nd gear, and I've gotten the car a bit straight, and now I can start to kind of turn it back to the corner. And now it's a real nice, easy turn-in. I'd like to try and get the left side tires onto the curb here, but I don't want to go too far because there's a big divot and you can hook the car too much and over-rotate the car. So it's not imperative to hit the curb here, but for the quick lap, I like to try and get the left side tires using all of the track. And you'll notice there on the brake release, on the turn-in, carrying that little bit of trail brake, you got to be careful not to over-rotate the car. As you say, I had to catch it a little bit there. But if that's the case, and you've already slowed enough for the corner, you can get back on throttle, and it'll help kind of pull itself straight, is what I'm doing there. And then once I get here to the apex, the corner, is when I can ease into full throttle and just drive it out. You can use all of the track here. If you dip the tires over into the off the curb over here onto the pavement, that's where you'll pick up the 1X. So try and keep it onto the track or onto the big curbing here, which you can drive onto no problem. Now we're back up full throttle and driving up the hill up to turn 6. So we'll play back through turn 5 here one more time in the real speed. So turn 6 doesn't really have a great brake marker. You want to do all your braking before you crest over the hill. And so a marker I've kind of found, if you really need something to look at, is right here where the red billboard sign starts on the wall here is about where you should be braking, which is up here prior to the crest. So you see I'll brake there to get the car slowed down and already settled, and down a gear to third before the crests up over the hill. And you'll see once it crests up, I have to let off the brakes and start to turn in immediately. I'm coming down to second gear for turn 6 because the car gets real light. It's carrying just that little bit of trail brake, but it's extremely important to get the car onto the curbing here in turn 6. And part of that is that early turn in. It's this another corner that you cannot press the brake zone into. You cannot attack the braking. You're not going to make up any time in turn 6. All the time you can make up at turn 6 comes right here on the exit, and that's being patient on the throttle. So once I've hit that mid corner apex, is then once I can get on throttle. You see, once I've gotten it all the way down onto the curb, right up to the grass, right where this little jut in the curbing is when the car's rotated and I can start to get back on throttle. And it's not a super hard stab into the throttle, but it's a nice progressive, 50%, and then ease into full as we're coming out, even with the traction control. And if you can get to full throttle, fully rotate and get to full throttle, the sooner you can, the faster you'll be out of turn 6. And there's a lot of time you can gain here because this is a nice downhill stretch, and you'll just see the the lap bar just be going green if you get a nice run out of here. And that's where you gain all your time in turn 6. It's not on the entry. So play this one more time, real speed here. Turn 7, start on the far left-hand side of the track. You can sometimes take this about flat out, but I usually give it just a little bit of a lift. It doesn't really cost you any time, but it's just much safer making sure you get the exit. So as you go to turn into the corner, I'm going to be lifting off of the throttle, and I want to do this lift early. I don't want to be lifting at the apex or after the apex. When I realize I'm going to start going off track, that's how you lose a lot of time in the next straight. So do your lift early, right at turn-in. And then once the time I get the right side tires onto the apex curb and hit that apex, that's when I can get back to full throttle and drive out of the corner. I'm going to be using a lot of the exit curb here, and you got to be careful because it has a lot of camber, off the road, and so it can really spit you if you're coming at it a little bit too hot. So you got to be careful about that, and also careful not to dip the left side tires into the grass because it'll be real easy to spin it out. And same thing when this curb rejoins here because it's a bit of it can buck you a little bit coming back on track, being that the curb here is a little bit off camber. So again, trying to follow the curb, just get right back on track as soon as possible, and should be no problem through there. So we can play back through that one more time, real speed. So as you come up to turn 8, it's another downhill braking zone. So we want to make sure we back this one up and don't attack it too far because it's just we're gonna keep gaining momentum as we come down the hill, and it's gonna be even harder and harder to stop. But it flattens out once we get down there. So my brake zone, my brake marker for turn 8 is about the 275-ish. You can push it to about 250, but anywhere in between 250 and 300 board is a good spot to brake for this corner. So there I brake about the 275. And I'm going to be coming down pretty much all the way to second gear usually. You can get through here in third gear if you roll a lot of speed, but second gear is much safer. I usually like to try and wait a little bit to downshift to second gear until I've started to turn into the corner, get to the bottom of the brake zone so you don't chirp the rear tires because it's you're lifting the rear of the car quite a bit with the downhill brake zone. So it's carry that trail brake down, get turn into the corner once I've landed. And now this is another corner where you have to be really careful about this curbing here, not to dip the left side tires into the grass at all, because that will very severely hurt your exit and get the car extremely squirrely here on exit, because it's a very flat, almost a little bit off camber exit of the corner. You can still get the left side tires onto the curb, but again, you'd be just as fast not getting onto that curb at all. As you see, I over-rotate a little bit, turning in a little bit too soon there, and that's just scrubbing my time on exit here. But you're trying to hit somewhat later apex, but again, if you do hurt your exit, you don't lose a whole lot of time, maybe 2-3 tenths, because we have the carousel coming right up, and so it's not a huge straight after the corner. But again, you gotta be careful on dipping too far on exit here, because it's very easy to clip grass, spin out. You gotta be careful not to get on throttle too aggressively, otherwise you can also kind of spin the rear tires or get the car into a slide, because it is still a little bit off camber here as we come out of the corner on exit. So real speed here. So coming into the carousel, very difficult corner to do quickly, and there's a lot of different approaches to the carousel that work and can do it correctly. I usually like to start about mid-track, and you like to try and drive in as deep as you can, but still be able to stay right up on the grass, or within half a car length of the grass. If you get too far out into the marbles, it's very easy to slide off, or you just lose a lot of time. So you want to make sure you keep this nice and tight. It's almost entirely one lane through here. No real passing opportunities. So it's turn in, and I start to ease off the throttle to help the car turn in, get a little bit of weight on the nose so I can help turn it in. And then once I have driven pretty much all the way up into the corners, then I can start to back out of it a little bit more. So this particular lap, I'm coming through here in 4th gear, and it's low in the RPM range in 4th gear, but this car has a lot of torque, so it can help really pull me out of here. Sometimes you can come in here right at the top of 3rd gear, maybe bouncing the rev limiter, help use the engine braking to slow you down a little bit if you come in a little bit too aggressively. So in that case, you can drive in a little bit more on throttle before dumping it. But either gear through here is just as quick. I usually like 4th gear. I've been using a little bit lower RPM range because get a little bit more torque coming out of the corner in the Corvette. And you'll see I'll eventually get fully out of the throttle to help the car turn. But now here's kind of where the techniques differ. Some people say don't get in throttle at all until you can see your exit. I like to use a little bit of throttle, mid corner, keep my mid corner speed up, and it's just kind of real smooth in, maybe 50% and back out. Not too much because you'll drive the car straight and a little bit off, but just kind of meter your radius with the throttle here. You can use a little bit of trail brake to bring it back in, but you don't want to open your hands too much at any given point because the car will end up going straight. So you want to try and keep your steering angle pretty constant all the way through the carousel. And you can back out of the throttle, help get a little bit more weight transfer to the front, turn it, help unload the diff a little bit, and help the car rotate as well. Once you're on throttle, locks the diff, will go very straight. But once you go full throttle, you want to try and stay there. And so I like to try and be at full throttle by the time I get to this curbing here on the right side. It's best not to really hit it, get the car right up to the edge of it, but you don't want to get the right side tires on it. And so you see I can get to full throttle right just before it, as I can kind of see through to the exit. And so I'll get on full throttle, and the car will start to track out and increase in radius here, but that's no problem because we have an exit curb on the left-hand side here. You just got to be careful, really experiment around here with when you can get to full throttle and try and find, how much the car's rotated and if you can get to full or not, so you don't end up over here on the grass. Because the last thing you want to do is give a check, lift right here because your radius is coming out a little bit too far. You got on throttle too soon because that'll hurt you all the way down through the kink and into Canada Corner, one of the longest straights on the track. So that's you want to make sure once you get to full throttle, you can keep it full and use all the track on exit. Got to be kind of careful. Sometimes this curb can kind of suck you over into the grass. You want to not use it unless you absolutely need it. So we'll play through the carousel one more time in real speed. So coming up to the kink, once we have the tires hot in the Corvette, we can take this corner flat out. Always like to start over here, dipping the left side tires onto this curbing. And basically once I can catch a glimpse of the apex curb is when I'm going to start to turn in. It's you don't want to turn in too early, because if you early apex the kink, you're going to have a really bad time on exit. So you still want a late apex, but it's really critical, the turn in time. If you drive in too deep, you're not going to make it to the apex, but if you turn in too soon, you're not going to be able to make the kink on exit. So it's a very fine line of when to turn in to get through the kink quickly. But either way, you want to get the right side all the way completely over onto the curb here. Onto the curb, just you can give it just a slight touch, but as you can see, it can kind of kick up the car a little bit too much, and that'll walk you right across the track, because we have a lot of lateral grip into the car, and it'll just help slide it right off the track. So usually try and get the right side just right up to the curb without hitting it too much. In this case, I end up hitting the curb, but I've done this a couple laps here, so I was pretty confident that I could stay flat-footed through here and use the curb here on exit. You got to be really careful once you get to the curb on exit, because it's a little bit too far into the grass and you're spinning off into the wall. But in this case right here, there's a tiny little bit of camber in the curb that can help push and keep you back on track. But you also have to be careful. There's a big divot right here as you switch from the curb to the pavement, not to get too upset there. So you want to make sure you have nice straight hands and the car's not loaded up to the side once you hit the big bump there. So I can play through that one more time here in cockpit view in real speed. Now you notice the line coming down the straightaway to set up for Canada corner. I'm going to start way over on the right-hand side, and this is kind of almost like a dog leg, because the track curves back to the left, and that's nice and straight here for the brake zone. So I'm going to try and stay to the right side of the track here, turn back to the left, and get the car as straight as possible in the brake zone so I can maximize my track usage as I enter into Canada corner. Now my brake marker for Canada corner is about the 4 board. It's very difficult to push the brake zone in Canada corner. It often feels like you're braking way sooner than any other corner on the track. But you need all of the available braking room. You're coming in. It's one of the fastest approaches on the entire track. So we really need all that braking distance. So here, once I reach the 4 board, I'm hitting the brakes. This is really tricky because you're kind of coming back to the left, not to drive over onto the grass and spin the car out under braking. So you got to be really cognizant of that. It's extremely easy to do. But get the car slowed down straight as possible. I'm coming down to 3rd gear. Once I get all the way down to 3rd gear, and I can see the apex curbing and start to see through the corner, is when I'm going to start to release off and just carry that little bit of trail brake into the corner to keep it nice and steady. I want to use as much of this apex curb as possible, rotate the car around, and once I get to the apex, I can get back on throttle, knowing I can utilize all of the exit curbing here all the way out to the gravel. And but you have the large exit curbing and then the narrow one here, and so you want to try and make sure you clip just on the inside of this, because if you do dip a wheel off there, it can really upset the car and also give you a 1X. But it's on throttle. It can use all the curbing here and drive out of the corner, no problem. Again, that's only down to 3rd gear through that corner. Turn 13. Pretty tricky corner, especially in this car. I'm going to start right side of the track, dipping the right side tires onto the entry curbing. And I'm going to get a nice early turn in the second I can kind of see any glimpse of yellow and red curbing there. And it's extremely important to get the car onto this, onto and over this apex curbing. Otherwise, you're going to end up going wide on exit. And so I can sometimes do this flat, but I'll usually just give a little bit of a lift. Again, on lift on turn in, help the car turn, but also so I don't have to lift on exit. There's actually a full lift there this lap, but then back onto throttle as soon as I get the left side onto the curbing there, and keep all the steering angle into it as we crest up over the hill here, so I keep the right side off of the dirt there. You can ride over the curb a little bit, and you can use all of this access road, but if you get too much onto the grass there, it not only can help spin you out, also give you that 1x. And then because 14 is coming up so fast, we'll kind of do the little transition here into turn 14. So this is another tricky corner with the track curving as we come into the brake zone. My brake marker for this one is this change in pavement here. And I'm going to brake at the change in pavement, and this is again a corner you don't want to push too far into because we have a long straightaway, uphill straightaway afterwards, so we want to maximize our run out of here. Again, it's very straight hands on the steering wheel, so I've kind of drifted over but then turned the car back straight for my braking. And I'll end up way over here on the left-hand side of the track as I start to ease out of the brakes and turn into the corner. And this is a late turn into the corner to get a really late apex. So I've gotten out of the brakes completely, just coast in here nice and smoothly, trying to keep up my mid corner speed. I'm going to tip into throttle a little bit to increase my radius because I've overslowed just a touch, but I'm looking for that late apex, like almost all the way up here, almost onto the straightaway is where I'm looking for, so that by the time I get to that point right there, I can be full throttle and driving out and up the straightaway, basically making the straightaway as long as possible. And it's on full throttle, start to unwind the hands and use as much of the exit curbing as you need. Again, trying to avoid the change from the thick curbing to the thin curbing there without dipping the left side tires off and spinning out over into the inside wall. So we'll play back through 13 and 14 one more time, real speed. And there we have a lap around Road America in the Corvette C6R. 159.175 coming across the line at 151 miles an hour after the good exit. So good luck practicing tonight. See you guys tonight and in the race tomorrow. Thanks for watching.